welcome back to my channel. Today is a very exciting day because I have acquired two of my absolute dream fabrics and we're gonna do something with them. Well, we're gonna do something with one of them. They're both beautiful plaids. The first one being this very classically Christmas plaid is what I've been calling this. This to me is the quintessential plaid, but we're not going to be working with this today. So we're going to put that aside. Stay tuned for that project. The star of the show today is this plaid. A little bit more, I'm going to say neutral because it doesn't have that pop of cream. Again, to me, this is a very perfect plaid. What we're going to be doing with this today is making a skirt, and it's going to be an extremely simple skirt. I have been looking for a perfect long plaid skirt for years, and since probably about 95% of the clothing that I buy and don't make, I thrift, and I really try to only buy natural fibers. That has proven to be very difficult. So today I'm gonna make it instead because I finally found my perfect cotton plaid fabrics. This was like so lucky. So let's go over the basics of this fabric. Let's measure it just to be sure and see what it was on the bolt. So after I've washed this, very important to pre-wash your fabrics, especially if it's a cotton, because it can shrink quite a bit. Okay, so this measures to be 60 inches from selvage to selvage, which if you don't know what a selvage is, it's this, call it finished edge. This is going to be the edge of the fabric bolt. In a fabric store, it's usually going to be folded over like this. So you're going to have both selvages on this side and a fold on this side. So this is all going to have to kind of work out to your measurements, but the best way to do this, in my opinion, is to go to the fabric store and hold the fabric. I purchased 2 meters of this fabric, and for this extremely simple construction, I'm literally just going to cut that in half. So for each panel, the front and the back, there's going to be 1 meter each to work with. And that's giving enough allowance for a really generous hem, because I want that to have a little bit of weight at the bottom, and a waistband. So I'm hoping that all of this is going to go to plan. If you're going to do this yourself, it greatly depends on what size your fabric bolt is, because fabrics come at different widths. It also has to do with what length you want your skirt to be and how gathered you want it to be. I like to take the route of just holding things up to myself in the fabric store, holding the bolt there and kind of scrunching it up to make the gathers to give me a good physical idea of how much fabric there is, because there's really only so much math can allow me to visualize. If this is a very beginner project for you and you are not familiar with making clothes, I would suggest trying the techniques I'm going to talk about. Just take like an old bed sheet or something. Try it out and see, based on the fabric you gave yourself, what does that give you? And then tweak it. Next time, maybe you want to leave extra room for a longer hem. Maybe you don't like how long it was. Maybe you want to add way more gathers. Maybe it's way too much and it's too pioneerish for you. Whatever you think, you can make those adjustments as you go along. That's the best way to learn. But generally, all of the techniques I'm going to show you in this are so beginner. This is a perfect first sewing project, and you can take these and build on them for so many other skirts in the future. So with all that being said, let's get started. So this is just one side. I'm just holding it up to kind of give me an idea of the gathers. I'm holding this at my waist and I'm giving myself the full length to basically the top of my feet, because I want to have a lot of room to work with for the hem and the waistband. This line at the top here, I'm going to cut. The nice thing about this skirt is that we're going to be working with gathers as opposed to pleats. So there's not really any math involved. You can be mathematical about it if you want to, but you really don't have to. Again, if you're a very, very beginner and this doesn't mean anything to you, these are gathers and these are pleats. So you can see the pleats are much more methodical. They're very evenly spaced. You're literally folding the fabric over on itself to create the sort of body in the skirt. Whereas gathers, think of them as being more just scrunched together. So a good rule of thumb with gathers to kind of calculate how much fabric you want to start with is you want to have at least 1.5 times the amount of the circumference you're trying to cover. So say for example you have a 30-inch waist, you're going to want at least 45 inches of fabric. That is even not enough to me. I like to do double when possible. And by now I've been sewing for so long that I don't always really measure this, especially if I can kind of manipulate the rectangle of the fabric on the bolt so that I don't have to cut anything away and waste it. I'll do that. So that's what I did with this, but if you're calculating something from scratch, like I said, play with those numbers and see what look you like best. I don't like it too gathered because I don't find that flatters my body type, but I also, for the sake of the garment having enough movement, sometimes 1.5 times my waist is not going to be enough. Also consider your waist to hip ratio. If you have a fairly straight down line from your waist to hips and it's not that different in measurement, then you can base it a little bit more off of your waist measurement. Whereas for me, my hip measurement is comparatively, I guess, quite larger than my waist. So I find sometimes if I go based off of my waist calculation, it doesn't necessarily flatter my hips in the way I thought it might. So by trial and error after so many years, I kind of just have a sense via what the fabric feels like when I hold it up to my body. Bit of an abrupt change. I got a little bit sidetracked yesterday and my camera died. So it's the next day now. I was hoping to finish this all in one go to kind of demonstrate how quick of a project this is, but you'll just have to trust me that yesterday I spent maybe 5 minutes on this. So we're really starting the clock today. I think a skirt is basically the perfect beginner project for someone who wears skirts, of course, because if you want to do this as simply as possible, you really only have to sew 4 separate straight lines. So the 2 side seams is what we're going to do first, and then your hem and your waistband. So all I'm going to do is just line up my pieces of fabric so that the 2 side pieces are aligned, and then I'm going to sew along them. I'm sewing along the selvage. Actually, this is a really great tip. If you can make it work so that with your measurements and with the way you want your final garment to look, it will work to do it from selvage to selvage for one panel. That's always going to be great for a beginner because basically it means that you don't have to finish this side on the inside of the fabric. I know for me, when I first started sewing, I really struggled to make my garments look really finished. Like, they would look great from the outside, but as soon as you turn them inside out, they would just be a mess. And that's something that I've really worked on a lot over the years. But a lot of those details you do need to be pretty premeditated about, and some of the process just might not make much sense as a beginner. So if you can utilize the selvage at any point to be on your inside seams, that's gonna, I think, make the project probably last longer in your wardrobe. You'll probably be less likely to get rid of it because it looks homemade. So I'm gonna put those seams together and sew. Oh my god, that's heavy. Since I sewed my side seams on the selvage, I'm not going to finish them in any way, just like I said, but the crucial part is next. That is going to make your life so much easier, and I feel like it's a step that a lot of people don't talk about when teaching beginners, and that is ironing. Trust me when I say this makes all the difference. Not only in the way that things look when you wear them on your body, but specifically when you're sewing, the iron just helps to almost like set your seams, and if you iron between as many steps as possible, it only makes the next step easier. So for example, with our side seams, finish them in whatever way you want to. If you're really just starting out, I would suggest get a pair of pinking shears if you don't already have them. They look like this. They're basically scissors that have a zigzag blade. It means that as far as the zigzag goes, that's where your fabric is going to stop fraying. They work really well for most fabrics in my experience. If you work with like natural woven fabrics, like a cotton like this, you're going to be absolutely fine. Pinking shears will be perfect, and when you put it through the wash, it will not fray past that point that you cut it to. So those are a really good option if you don't want to get into like fancy finishes or getting a serger, things like that. Another good option that I like to use is pop my machine on a zigzag stitch. It almost like mimics what a serger would do by like interlocking the seam. So you kind of set it so that one half of the zigzag goes into the fabric and the other goes out, so you're almost like binding the edge. Those are two great options. I use them all the time, and again, I sew mostly the things that I wear out of cotton, so these work super well for that. So let's get to ironing, my favorite part. Now that I've ironed the side seams, I'm going to do something that I don't always do just because I freehand a lot of things during sewing and I don't use as many pins as I should. I'm going to recommend that you pin at this next step and then iron and then sew, but I'm just going to iron. You can do it that way also if you're working with a plaid. It already has lines in it that are evenly spaced, so working with a pattern that has some sort of basically predetermined spacing guide can be really helpful for a beginner as well, but I would always recommend pinning as much as you can. I'm going to iron down the waistband and maybe the hem as well while I still have my iron on. I haven't mentioned the elastic yet, but if you want to do an elastic waistband, I think that's the easiest thing to do. Think about what kind of elastic you like to wear around your waist. I don't like anything that's too thin and flimsy. I like something with a little bit more support, but that's not too tight. There's like a million different types of elastic you can get if you go to the fabric store. I would recommend going somewhere you can buy it by the yard or meter instead of like a set amount in a package, just because it's going to be so much cheaper. What I'm going to do is fold the fabric over to include this. To start off with as a guide, you might even just want to lay the elastic down and fold the fabric over so that you can get a good idea of it, as well as measuring. So I know my channel needs to be at least 1.25 inches. I would give it about 1/8 of an inch of room on the other end, because if your elastic is sitting too tight, it's going to make the waistband buckle and it's not going to look good. So make sure you just give a little bit more room, and then also add for room for the fabric to be tucked under and sewn onto. So I'm going to show you how I'm going to fold all of that and use my elastic as the guide without really measuring, because this is a very casual sewing tutorial. So if I lay my elastic down on my fabric here, this is about as much as I want for the fabric being tucked under that I'm going to sew down. So essentially when that happens, it's going to look like this. Over and then over again, leave a little bit of extra room, and then that's where you're going to sew. Don't worry, the elastic won't be in the fabric when you sew, so you won't be able to puncture it. So let's try that again. I'm just going to do this. I'm following the lines of the plaid, which is very helpful. Like that, and then I'm going to do that, and then I'm going to fold it there. Make sure that there's enough room on both sides. You can see there's like about 1/8 of an inch on either side of this. That's going to be more than enough room. You don't want it to be too roomy, because again, that won't give you the structure that you want, but leaving a little bit extra so that you don't have to stitch this down on the very edge. You want to give yourself like a good amount of room so that it's not too finicky. I'm just going to start ironing it here, and then the more you iron, the easier it's going to be. It's going to kind of fall into place as you go. There's all sorts of details that you can add as well to your waistband. If you want to add like a ruffle on top, for example, all you need to do is just bring this fold down a little bit more, and then you're going to sew your channel here and leave this here. So you have quite a bit of extra fabric over the elastic, and that's gonna bunch up when you put your elastic in. Again, choose your own adventure. There are so many details that you can continue adding on to this simple project as you learn. So let's take a look at what we just pressed down. It's gonna look something like that. I always like to start this where a side seam is, because we're going to be inserting the elastic after we sew this channel. It just makes it a little bit easier if on one side the side seam is right there and you don't have as much to push through if you left your seams unfinished like this. If this doesn't make any sense to you, it will once you start doing it. So you can see my side seam is right there. Those are the two selvages put together. So I'm going to start this seam basically right on or right before where the seam is. So right there, we're going to sew the channel all the way down, and then once you reach almost the very end of that circle, you're going to stop about 2 inches maybe right before the side seam. I haven't filmed a sewing tutorial in quite a long time, and I forgot how confusing it is for me in my Canadian brain to flip-flop between imperial and metric and try and be consistent, because in Canada we kind of just pick and choose which ones we use for different things. So if I'm jumping back and forth between meters and inches and you're like, what is this girl talking about? That is why we live a very confused existence in Canada measuring things. So there's a couple different ways you can feed your elastic through the channel that we just made. My preferred method, this is what I've always done, is I use a safety pin. Again, this is going to be trial and error. You can just kind of pick up your own way to do things. There's a million different ways you can do almost every single step of sewing a garment. So once you get the hang of things as a beginner, you can start trying out different things and figure out what you like doing best. But I've found this to be super easy. All you're going to do is attach the safety pin to the edge of the elastic like that. So we're going to find the opening we made, and this is when it's going to be very apparent to you why we started at the side seams. You can easily be pushing it through and you're hitting the seam there. You want to make sure you're going all the way through past that side seam. Just push it through, and we're going to start scrunching it. Slide the fabric over the safety pin and pull. Scrunch it and pull. Always be very mindful, especially if you're working with a lot of fabric, that you know that the other end of the elastic isn't being fed through the channel of fabric. Then you're gonna have to pull it all out and start over, which isn't the end of the world, but just keep an eye on it. So we've reached the inevitable part of the project where something has gone wrong. This happens almost every time. The way that this waistband is sitting, I'm not liking it. It's a little bit too bulky. Hopefully yours didn't turn out this way. But this is why, again, trial and error is always best. So in order to save myself the maximum amount of time and not undo too many things, stay with me. I'm going to take the elastic out. So what that means is I'm going to find the side seam that I put it in on, and I'm just going to reverse a couple steps. I'm going to rip the seam. Okay, found it. Trusty seam ripper. If you're a beginner and you don't have a seam ripper, this would be honestly, next to scissors, the next thing that I would purchase if I was just starting out. Very, very essential. Makes your life so much easier if you have to undo something. It's literally just like this little hook with a blade that you can easily stick under your stitches, and I'm just gonna undo enough that I can pull the elastic out, not too much. So what my plan is when I take this elastic out is I'm gonna flip the whole skirt upside down, because for me and the fabric that I chose, it doesn't matter. Obviously this isn't part of the tutorial, this is just me adapting to my circumstances right now. I'm gonna flip it upside down, and I'm gonna utilize this channel that I sewed as my hem, because I wanted a thick hem like this on the bottom anyways. So that ultimately won't really make much of a difference. This is why I don't really post tutorials very often, because most of the time my sewing projects take a turn and I just have to kind of come up with creative solutions as I go. I feel like if you're a beginner and you watch tutorials that just go perfectly, or you try to follow patterns and things just inevitably go wrong, you might think, I'm so bad at sewing, I'm never going to be able to do this, when that's not true at all. It's really not that difficult. It's just trial and error over and over and over again, and acquiring as many skills as you can so that you can adapt in different ways when your project starts to go south, which happens frequently. In order to fix the way that this waistband looks, basically I have too much fabric to elastic. I like to have it so that when I pull the elastic completely taut, there's no more fabric gathered. And for me, as someone who doesn't really do a lot of math when it comes to sewing, this happens sometimes, and that's fine. Pull the elastic out, very satisfying. Okay, so I'm gonna quickly close up that hole just so that I don't forget to do that at the end. In theory, the next step you want to do is hold this up to your body and see how big you want your hem to be, if you need to cut any fabric off before you hem it, all of that. Since my hem is now already decided for me, that step isn't going to quite be the same. Hopefully you're tracking all of this. This took a very confusing turn. I'm going to hold it up like that and see if I need to cut any off before I do my waistband, is basically what I'm saying. And then I'm just going to do, like, every few inches, I'm going to do a couple pleats. This is not going to be exact because I'm going to gather the fabric after anyways. So I think that's what I'm going to work with for reducing the fabric. Yeah, let's go with that. That's fine. So I've added my series of pleats, and you can see they're pinned down. I didn't use any math for this, obviously, especially because it's a plaid. I just fold based on the lines and where they fall. I'm gonna stitch all of these down. It's gonna take a very long time, but I still wanted to show you this just because it is another option of something that you could do to add a little bit of interest. You essentially saw how to put the elastic band in the full waist, and this is just an alternate way that you can do things. This is almost my front waist measurement, just with a little bit of extra room. I'm gonna see how this looks on the front, and then I might even just the elastic in the back. We will see. I'm going to sew all these down. It's going to take a while, so I'm just going to do it off camera. I'm just going to follow the lines of where I pinned and then iron it afterwards. Skirt is finished, and I'm so happy with the way that it turned out. I want to walk you through a couple of the details that I decided to go with in the end. Like I've said throughout this video, I know this didn't exactly go the way that I said it would at the beginning in terms of being like an extremely simple beginner tutorial that will take like an hour. I ended up going with a couple more slightly advanced techniques, but not really. They were just time consuming. I just wanted to go above and beyond to make this a skirt that I will wear for a really long time. Let me talk you through a couple of the finishes that I went with and show you them up close. So for the hem, as you know, I utilized what I had originally sewed as the waistband. So this is about like 2 inches maybe, which gives it a nice generous amount of weight. If I wasn't using the waist and I was making this hem from scratch, I would have probably folded it over in completion twice, so it would have had one more layer of fabric all the way through to give it a little bit more weight. Generally, I do like the weight of this, and I like how it gives it a little bit more structure to the bottom of the skirt. If you're making a long skirt like this with a significant amount of gathers, how you hem it is going to greatly affect how it hangs. And this is what I mean when I say you can't really find garments that are made like this at like a reasonable price point, because obviously if you add a really substantial hem that gives the skirt weight, it's going to take more fabric, which is going to cost more money. So a lot of times you don't see a really nice generous hem on skirts and dresses. That's the mark of a good quality garment. And a great tip for if you're sewing something and you want to make it look a little bit elevated and less homemade, give it a really substantial hem if you want the bottom to have some structure and not look like it's just kind of flopping there, you know? The top, as you saw, I did decide to go with pleating because this is a plaid. I actually like how this turned out, the way that I was able to fold them. You can see as it goes down past the pleats, the part that pops open is that brighter red, so the top is like a lot more neutral, and then as the skirt opens it splays into that more like pop of color. I actually didn't end up finishing the inside of this, which is the only thing I have left to do, but I might take in the elastic just a touch, so I haven't finished this edge off yet. But what I've done just to stitch this down so that I didn't have to fold the waistband over again in all these pleats, I don't want to sew through that many layers of fabric, so I left a pretty generous amount of fabric there. And all I'm gonna do when I do go to finish this is take a ribbon, maybe a velvet ribbon. I really like when I do a finish like this to make it like kind of a nicer fabric. I'm literally just going to take one half of the ribbon, fold it over so that it kind of encapsulates this. The other detail that I didn't show in the video, but another great tip if you want to just elevate things a little bit and give your garment more structure, I went over my waistband twice with top stitching. So as opposed to it just being one channel that the elastic is sitting in, when you're working with a lot of fabric like this, and if your elastic isn't super stiff, in order to give that a little bit more structure, if you find you put an elastic band in and it feels like it's like rolling on the inside, stretch out your fabric like this and then run this through your machine while you're holding it stretched. And when you let go of your fabric, the elastic will be pretty much just as stretchy, but it will retain this structure and be straight the whole time. This is the reason why I think I'm gonna go back and take in the elastic just a little bit, because sometimes when you do this technique, it can stretch the elastic just a little bit more than what it would have been if you didn't add that top stitching. But that is it. This is the finished skirt. I love it so much, and I am so desperate for the weather to cool down so that I can wear it. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like down below. Let me know some of your sewing projects coming up and what you want to see from me. I will see you back here next time.